but the thing is with the dragon head is there's so many options, isn't there? So your eye can be a little pot. Yes? Just a little pot. It could be a yogurt pot, anything like that. Yes? And yes. On my dragon, I've been exploring how to look at the fire. So I think that's something we can think about today as well. How do we make the fire stick out from the front of the dragon's nose? Like in this one there. And when I did it, I'm just using paper, but it would be good if we could think about other kinds of paper that come in different colors and things, so we can make not a white fire, but some kind of red, colorful fire. Other things we need to think about with our dragons are the scales, because one of the key things about the dragon is that he has scales. So that can be done in many different ways. I'm using a roll of tissue paper, kitchen towel, to make scales, so that simple triangular shapes that we can then stick on to the face, or we can use it when we're making the rest of the costume. So thinking about a collar piece, so we're going to need to think about the scales coming along. Okay, so we also need to think about the tongue, because that's one of the things that is very characteristic of the dragon. And so when we cut the first card away, there was a piece left over from making the headband, and I've taken that and I've added a piece of paper to it that I can curl, and I'm going to use that to become the tongue. Yeah, and you see again, it bounces around. And remember, I showed you how to just curl, take paper and curl it. And then it has more movement. So the card gives a bounce, and the fat and the paper gives a bit of a flicky, more movement there. So yeah, so you can do something different. And then you can find a way, depending on how your headband goes, to attach the tongue to the card, to your head and to the card, so it'll stick out like a tongue. So that's the bit you need to think about, sitting this onto the headband that you already have, and that's going to give you a nice tongue. And as you perform your dragon, it should bounce around and make an interesting shape. Now you can also, of course, change the shape of this so it doesn't look like it's a piece of cardboard that we just cut out of the box. We can change the shape of that, couldn't we? Just give it a bit more of a curvy shape, perhaps, just so that it doesn't just look so straight. Just take a little shape out like that. And so that little shape that we've taken out there will start to give the tongue its own personality and take it away from a cereal box shape. So just by taking a piece out there, we've given it a bit of shaping, better than just a straight line that it was before. And of course, if we can color it in red or cover it with something that's red, that would be even better, or pink. Perhaps we've got a napkin in the kitchen that could be that color, then we can work with something like that. So that's going to be an idea that could work for the tongues. So we mustn't forget those. I do want to touch base on the flame, especially because Dawn, that was just the most amazing drawing there with the flames coming out of your dragon. That was fantastic. I thought it was so lovely. What I just draw something that looks a bit like a flame. I'm going to draw it on this colored paper because it's just an old leaflet that I had from many years ago. Actually, it's a gig we did in Wembley. And so I have these leaflets hanging around. So I'm just going to draw a flame shape, you know, kind of a down and wavy shape. Can you see that line? No, you can't. Okay, so I need to think on that. I'm going to draw it and then cut it quickly, because then you'll be able to see the outline. So that we can see what a flamey outline might look like. You'll see it better. Okay, very quickly. And usually when I'm doing anything like this, I would cut 2 or 3 at a time so that I can be quick about it. So basically you want a wavy shape, yeah, a bit kind of like that. A wavy shape. And if you just cut into the bottom of your wavy shape, you can turn it into more of a flamey kind of feeling, like a flamey shape. Now I have to say that this is a flamey shape. It's also a lovely shape for a tongue. That is good, isn't it? It's like a tongue. Yeah, but this you can make into your flame. And remember, I was saying about when you fold your paper, give your folder paper a little crease, that little crease makes it stand up. So now instead of being floppy, it's out like this. So that means I can stick it to my dragon head and it can appear to be flying out of his nose like that. Yes, you can stick it there. Now we got this big flame shape, and you can have as many as you like coming out of the nose. And this was nice firm paper, so it's holding its shape very nice. And you can have it flying down, you can have it sticking out. And I'd use the egg box here, so I can stick that inside of there, and it looks like it's really flying out of the nose of the dragon. Yeah, so think about your nostrils, because that's the point where you want it blowing out of the nose of your dragon. And a little bit of foil on that means that if you end up being able to use a torch or something like that to add a little bit of shadow or lighting, it'll reflect in any color that you put.
Well, when you're out and about, there's often loads of leaflets stacked up to give away. So, you know, I mean, I'm not suggesting you out deliberately, but if you're out and about anyway and you see a load of leaflets, look for the red ones, the yellow ones, the green ones. Nice thick card, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody will be so pleased that their leaflets have disappeared, that everybody's
been used. Yeah. Remember what we were talking about before about offcuts. So look at that amazing shape. So I can just turn that offcut again into another flame just by following the curve that it already is. Something like that. Again, that's a great tongue. And you can either leave it as that shape or just cut into it a little bit at the end. And we've got another one. So what is an offcut is always very useful for you to use. So you don't have to waste. And so either recycling and looking after the environment can work very, very well. And that little crease, really fantastic. There you go. So now we've got 2 flames to shoot out of the dragon's nostril. Out of there, like that. Yes, and the nice thing about that is because I was able to use the whole of the A4 sheet of leaflet to turn to create that flame. And then I can stick them together and let them shoot out of the nose. And it stops being a tongue because the crease now is holding it straight out. So it doesn't do the floppy bending that a normal piece of paper or card would do. So you're constructing with your paper. So now, Dawn, we need those drawings to be 3D. That flame that you drew, I'd love to see how many red flames are coming out. That would be amazing. Yeah, from that drawing. That's fantastic. So there's a little bit of thought in there. So we talked about, we haven't drawn anything, but remember that he needs to have scales, whether you make them little frilly. So this is just my tissue paper, using it there. And you can stick it onto anything. You can make a neck piece to become the scales just on the chest. because I think a lot of our dragon stuff is going to be right up here. So think about that. What have you got that you can make scales with? I had been using a bit of old newspaper that I found, but it wasn't terribly exciting, this newspaper. So, but I actually found that this was a bit nicer because I could cut a lot of them together in one cut, folding the paper and using it to cut one cut. You know, you take it and you fold it in half, fold it again in four. So we can now, every time we cut, we're cutting four, so it shouldn't take us as long to make into, if you want to do more scales, or if you want smaller scales to go on the head, then we can do that. So if you cut along the middle, it'll look like that, and then when you cut along the middle, you'll get two lines. Or sometimes what I do is just fold it along like that. So instead of cutting it, I'm just folding it. So I've got two lines. So I can use that on the chest. I can use it along the arms. And as I speak about arms, we were looking at wings. I see you drew that amazing wing. So there's so many different ways. Your wings were up in the air, but I started playing with a sleeve as a wing. I used 2 bread bags, joined them together to make a sleeve, and started to play with putting scales on them. That will actually work very, very well for working out a chess piece. How these continue to become more of the scales for the body. So there's lots of ideas for different ways of using the same theme that you've used. Because actually, if you're making a wing, you may not put scales on the wing. You're going to cut the wing in the shape. But with making the bodice and the body, you can do that and use your scales. So we need scales. So we've got his tongue, we've got his claws, we've got the head. And so we're missing something now. What is it that we're missing? What are we missing? The tail. Oh, the tail. Before we go to the tail, I was experimenting actually with how we could make a bigger wing. So I was just going back, we've done bin bags before. I took a piece of the foil carton roll and I've stuck it onto my little broom. And I think that's going to end up making a great kind of a tail, which depending on how you're working, we can stick it to the back of the chair, we can add things to it, and we can then make the end of the tail, which normally looks a bit like a fork, a dragon fork. What is that? This is a triangle. It'll look a bit like that. This there, not there. Something like that. You can pick that one there to become our dragon tail. I didn't want to you can do bottles, we can tie lots of things together to have a more moving tail. That's just a play. But I was just thinking about sticking it onto how to make a long tail that can be, but this, if it was a string that was movable, then we'd have a more flexible tail. So we look at tails in more detail in the future, but that's a start at thinking about things that you have around the home that you could use that becomes part and parcel of your performance with your tail. The neck, well, it really depends on how your head fits, how your hat fits onto, where your jaw fits on your head. I'm just going to take this one that's pinned on. and have a little look. Because when you're wearing it, actually don't see a huge amount of the neck. So when you've got your head on, depending on how you position the head, see when you do that, like this, you're going to get your jaw shape coming right down here. And the other side is going to come and join into it. So you won't see very much of the neck, which is why I started playing with the chest, because when you need to think about, oh, did I turn around? So when you're putting it on the side like this, you see, the neck disappears behind under the jaw. So you won't really, if you use this design, you won't really see very much of your neck. And what you need to think about is it's the way in which your dragon plays to the camera, which might actually be more of this position than this position, because when it's in that position, we will see your face in between. But the way that you mount the dragon head should give you a little bit down like this, and then your flames should be shooting out. So shouldn't really be in shadow, really. Your face should be in shadow. And by the time you've done your flames off the middle like this, and the bottom jaw comes round here, your neck should disappear within the whole thing. So it's a really good question. But that's why the scales on here then make a lot of sense, because the next thing you will see other than the jaw would be the scales on your chest. And a lot of the better angles for the design will be lower like this, and playing to the angle of the shape. Because in this design, that's what's going to happen. Wherever you put, unless you mount it a lot higher on your head like this, in which case your neck is visible and the teeth are in front of your face. You can do that as well. You can mount it higher. Yes. So there's flexibility in the design for everybody to make their dragon into something that they would like it to be. And when it's higher, the good thing about it being higher is the tongue makes more sense, because the tongue then sits out where the teeth is when it's high, whereas when it's low, it looks like it's coming out of the nose if you stick it on the head. So you actually have to stick the tongue. You actually have to stick the tongue very low down for it to come out of the mouth. So that is a bit of technical thinking once we go to the tongue. Where exactly and how do you get the tongue to come out of the right part? So it doesn't seem like it's actually coming out of the nose, but coming out of more out of the mouth. You still need to find the thing that you can make into all your layers of scales down the front of it. And what a clever idea to use the old duvet to create that very unique dragon. So I think that each person, we do need to think, how do we make that unique dragon? I'm going to still stick with some of the kitchen stuff, and because the long flowing piece of kitchen towel does create a backdrop onto which you can then put your layers down. Again, it's quick, it's easy. It'll take all the different glues, and you can cut as many different colors, shapes, and you're onto that to make the longer bits of your costume. And it could be panels, it could be shapes. So, thinking you can make a onesie, but I think most of us are going to jump into a bin bag and stick stuff all over it, is a very quick answer, obviously, of course. The bin bag is so useful. And you can get bin bags in different colors for recycling, isn't it? You can get different colored ones. Now, if you have a colored one, then that just changes the black. But so finding the things that have a bit of color really does help if we're not going to use paint or something like that. Before we go quickly, just Dawn, because of her drawing, Dawn, I made this shape out of newspaper, but I don't know if you're going to have access to newspaper. Your wing was very much up like this on your dragon. So do think about how you can take pieces of A4 paper together to make what looks like a very bigger fin that can be at the back of your dragon, we can look at how to put it on when we use card. And actually, one of the cardboard boxes, if you have more cardboard boxes, can be cut into that shape. We'll be able to cut it into that shape so that it can, become something quite interesting. And because the cardboard box has this bend, this fin, then that can give you a nice shape. If that's stuck onto there, and that will then, can you see that? So your cardboard box gives you a lot of possibilities with shapes and with paper sticking off the end for making a different kind of a wing. So whether you use bin bags or you want it hanging as a bit of fabric, or you want to stick it on something behind, so just using this box again, and we can tie a ribbon to it around the back, we'll be able to turn to create a different kind of a wing using string. So you have options there.